Before rebellion darkened the celestial plains, before the sting of sin poisoned the ethereal air, before the very concept of fall found its echo in the heavens, there existed an angel whose inner fire blazed with an intensity that dwarfed even divine judgment. He bore the name Samuel, the venom of God. This appellation was not a mark of inherent malevolence, but rather a reflection of his burden to embody the facet of the divine that others dared not confront. The aspect that destroys, that metes out punishment, that brings all things to their ultimate end. He was the embodiment of consequence, the living echo of divine decree. When God first sculpted light from the primordial void, Samuel stood among the vanguard, his being resonating with the birth of creation. His wings spanned the cosmos, his presence crackling with an energy akin to lightning made manifest. He was not the gentle harbinger of hope like Gabriel, nor the patient balm of healing like Raphael. Samuel was the unerring sword of divine will, the embodiment of law given form. And God cherished him, for Samuel executed the tasks that lay beyond the capacity of any other angel. He obeyed with an unwavering fidelity. When Michael questioned, Samuel executed. When Gabriel sought understanding, Samuel simply declared, "It is God's will." He was the enforcer, the one who transformed abstract justice into palpable reality. In the heavens, where ceaseless light and celestial music painted eternity, Samuel's silence served as his form of worship. Yet this very silence concealed a nascent disquiet. Unseen by his brethren, even the discerning Michael Samuel began to experience a sensation foreign to his angelic nature. With each command carried out, with each judgment delivered, he felt the crushing weight of that which he had destroyed. He witnessed entire legions of celestial spirits extinguished for their transgressions. He heard the fading cries of lesser beings annihilated by his righteous blade. And though he knew God's will was inherently perfect, a seed of doubt began to sprout within him. Could perfection itself inflict pain? This unspoken question, this infinitesimal crack in his unwavering belief, sent the first subtle tremor through the foundations of heaven. The Creator had ordained Samuel as the prosecutor of the celestial realms, entrusting him with the examination of the hearts of angels and mortals alike. He moved amongst the ranks, his presence a mirror reflecting every hidden flaw. While others offered hymns of praise, Samuel observed. While others rejoiced in the endless light, Samuel watched, and a chilling realization began to dawn. "Even light casts shadows," he once murmured to the silent stars. "Even purity conceals ulterior motives." He was both right and wrong, for the more deeply he peered into the darkness within others, the more clearly he discerned its reflection within himself. There was a time when Samuel stood directly before the throne of God, not in subservience below, not in camaraderie beside, but face to face. Few angels ever dared approach that close. He was the executor of divine decrees, the conduit through which God's judgment flowed into creation. He extinguished corrupt stars, silenced rebellious seraphim. Without hesitation, without question, he brought an end to all that was unholy. He was power incarnate, order, personified fear, given form. He was necessary. Yet therein lay the genesis of tragedy. Necessity breeds a sense of indispensability, and indispensability slowly morphs into a feeling of equality. One day, a day that may have been a breath in the eternity of heaven, Samuel witnessed God create something new, something fragile, something mortal, something called humanity. For the first time, Samuel's voice faltered. He gazed upon these creatures fashioned from dust and divine breath, and turned to Michael, his face etched with confusion. "We bleed for our loyalty. We burn with holy fire. Yet he bestows his very likeness upon them." Michael offered a gentle smile. "That is love, brother." But Samuel remained silent, for love was a language he could not comprehend. Justice, obedience, these concepts he grasped. But love, which forgave where punishment was deserved, which transmuted judgment into mercy, remained an enigma. And so when the time arrived to test these humans, when the celestial court required an accuser, God turned his gaze upon Samuel. In that moment, a chilling smile touched Samuel's lips. This was his purpose. He became the prosecutor in the heavenly court, the voice that questioned the very hearts of mankind before God, the one who declared, if they sin, they must die. If they disobey, they must fall. He was perfectly suited for the task, cold, precise, unyielding. He believed he was serving the divine will, but something was changing within him. With each condemnation, with each pronouncement of judgment, a disturbing whisper echoed in the depths of his being, "You enjoy this." Was it pride? Was it a subtle corruption? Or was it merely the echo of the role God had ordained for him, the conscious voice of divine wrath? Thus begins the tale of Samuel. Not with defiance, not with envy, but with an angel who loved justice with such ferocity that he forgot the very essence of mercy. Perhaps that was his undoing. Perhaps that was the catalyst for God's eventual sorrowful whisper, "Samuel, enough." But how does one command an angel whose entire being is constructed from judgment to cease judging? He was the storm God had unleashed upon creation. And like all storms once born, he refused to heed the voice of his Creator. Now, we must confront a darker truth. If God in his infinite wisdom foresaw the path Samuel would tread, did he inadvertently create his own adversary? Or was Samuel simply the reflection of a side of God that mortals were never meant to behold? Heaven knew no night, yet a silence akin to darkness descended whenever Samuel entered the court. The other archangels attributed this silence to reverence, but deep within their hearts, they knew its true source: fear. Samuel was the voice of the courtroom of heaven. When a soul was weighed, it was the timbre of his pronouncements that resonated through eternity. When judgments were rendered, it was his hand that carried the sentence forth. He did not shout. He did not rage. He merely spoke, and creation bent to his verdict. The angels hailed him as the prosecutor of God, and God himself declared, "Let every word of justice pass through Samuel." Initially, Samuel served with unwavering perfection. He believed that judgment was a form of love, that to correct, to punish, was to purify. But as time wore on, the righteous fire within him began to twist and distort. Each trial left behind fragments of anger, resentment, and grief. He witnessed betrayal, hypocrisy, and the unsettling truth that even angels harbored envy, that even light could cast shadows. He began to observe that while he tirelessly executed God's decrees, the other angels sang, praised, and rested. He was perpetually at work, perpetually destroying, perpetually bringing things to an end. And one day, Samuel whispered, not aloud, not even in defiance, but within the confines of his own heart, "If none can execute justice as flawlessly as I does, that not make me the truest servant of all." It was a subtle thought, a perilous one. But thoughts are seeds, and in heaven even the smallest seed can crack open eternity. When the first human committed sin, the court of heaven convened. The air throbbed with divine light. The throne radiated a brilliance that no mortal eye could bear, and standing before it, wings outstretched, eyes blazing with authority, Samuel waited. He already knew the verdict, "The soul that sins shall die." He repeated it silently, ready to deliver it with his characteristic cold precision. But then God paused. It was the first time Samuel had ever perceived hesitation in the Creator's voice. He looked up and saw a glimmer of mercy in the Almighty's eyes. "They will live," God declared, "for my plan transcends their fall." Samuel froze, his wings rigid, his inner flame flickering. "Live," he whispered. After betrayal, the angels murmured amongst themselves. Michael bowed his head. Gabriel sighed in relief. But Samuel clenched his hands until sparks flew from them like embers. He stepped forward, his voice carefully controlled. "My Lord, your word is law. If law is not upheld, does it retain its holiness?" He was not defying, not yet. He was seeking understanding. But the question itself fractured something sacred. God gazed upon him, and in that gaze was love, the kind of love that burns more fiercely than any fire. "You were made for judgment," God said softly, "but you do not yet understand mercy." Mercy. That word again. The word that had no place in Samuel's lexicon. The word that shattered his carefully constructed certainty. He bowed his head. But as he turned away, an unthinkable emotion surged through him: jealousy. Why should these frail creatures of dust receive what he, the eternal executor, never could? Forgiveness, compassion, a second chance. That day, Samuel walked the corridors of heaven in silence. The light dimmed around him. The choirs grew quiet. Michael followed him, asking with gentle concern, "Brother, what troubles you?" Samuel's reply was calm, almost unnervingly so. "I am troubled by mercy, Michael. It forgives what must be purged." Michael looked at him with sorrow. Mercy does not erase justice, it redeems it. But Samuel merely offered a faint smile. "Then redemption is a loophole, not a law." And he turned and walked away. Weeks turned into months. The court continued its proceedings, but Samuel's loyalty began to shift, not outwardly, but within. He still carried out God's commands. He still punished rebellion. But he began to relish the sound of fear in those he judged. He began to believe that his justice was purer, more righteous than God's compassion. He started to view himself not as a servant, but as the fulcrum, the point of balance. The one who could rectify what even the Creator in his boundless mercy had overlooked. There exists a point in every angel's journey where obedience transforms into identity, and identity morphs into pride. Pride was the whisper that had once before unmade heaven. But Samuel did not rebel outright. He simply tightened his grip on justice until even mercy began to resemble corruption in his eyes. One night, during what heaven calls the still hour, when creation lay dormant, Samuel stood at the edge of the firmament. Below him, the mortal world shimmered. He saw humans laughing, sinning, loving, repenting. He whispered, "They break every law, and yet you smile upon them. I destroy for you, and you look away." Then he raised his gaze towards the throne above and declared, "Tell me, my Lord, do you still control the fire you placed within me?" No answer came, only silence. But silence can be treacherous, for it can be mistaken for permission. From that night forward, Samuel began to oversee the destroying angels with a new zeal. He issued orders before heaven spoke. He delivered punishments before judgments were confirmed. When Michael confronted him, Samuel simply replied, "I act as I was created to execute." But his eyes were changing. The light within them flickered not with holy fire, but with something else, something distinctly human: rage. What would you do if the very purpose for which you were created, justice, began to feel like the reason you were being cast aside? Would you relinquish your service? Or would you push further until even God himself was compelled to intervene? For that is precisely what transpired. The angel of judgment crossed a line so profound that it sent tremors through the very fabric of heaven. There is a moment before every cataclysm, a moment when the air grows still, when an almost unbearable tension hangs in the balance. That stillness, that pregnant quietude before everything shatters, was the prevailing atmosphere in heaven on the day Samuel changed irrevocably. He still stood amongst the archangels. His light still shone with celestial brilliance, but something had shifted behind his eyes. The peace that had once resided there was gone, replaced by a pressure held in check only by an iron will. Heaven had witnessed rebellion before, but this was different. This was quieter, colder, and infinitely more dangerous. Samuel did not rage against God. He simply began to act independently without waiting for divine command. The first death. The ancient texts speak of a time when the first mortal soul departed its earthly vessel. No angel understood the nature of death, not even Samuel, until God whispered, "Now it begins." Upon hearing those words, Samuel stepped forward. Not Michael, not Gabriel, but Samuel. He asked no questions. He spread his wings, now laced with tendrils of black fire, and descended to the mortal realm. The earth was still nascent, imbued with the warmth of creation. There before him lay the frail body of a man, motionless, silent, breathless. The other angels watched from the celestial heights, uncertain of how to proceed. But Samuel moved with unwavering precision. He touched the man's face. His hand glowed first with white, then gold, then crimson light. In that instant, the soul rose from the body, like smoke, trembling, disoriented, afraid. The first death had occurred, and Samuel had become its herald. He carried the soul to heaven's gate and laid it before the throne. He waited for the Lord's voice, but God remained silent. Only the terrifying silence of eternity filled the court. Finally, Samuel whispered, "It is done." Judgment carried out. Still no response. He looked up, his voice carefully controlled, but tinged with a sharp edge. "Is this not my purpose?" Then came the reply, not in thunderous rage, but in quiet sorrow. "Yes, Samuel, but death is not destruction. Death is transition. You have transformed the gate into a grave." The courtroom shuddered. Samuel's light dimmed. He yearned to argue, but how does one argue with God? He bowed his head, yet a single thought burned within him. "Then you made me wrong." He did not utter the words aloud, but heaven heard them nonetheless, for thoughts of such magnitude reverberate deeper than any spoken language. After that day, the name Samuel acquired a new and somber meaning. The angels began to refer to him as the angel of death. It was intended as an honor, but it felt like exile. While the others sang and created, Samuel alone descended to the places where life ended. He became a shadow, passing through battlefields, deserts, cities. Wherever life faded, his presence followed, solemn, silent, cold. He never disobeyed, he never lied, he never shirked his duty. But his perception of that duty began to shift. He saw too much. He witnessed every tear, every scream, every hand reaching for a mercy that never arrived. He saw children die, kings fall, lovers torn apart. The more he saw, the more he came to a terrifying realization. If this is justice, why does it feel so cruel? One night, if heaven can truly be said to have nights, Samuel stood alone at the very borders of creation. The light of the firmament glowed beneath him, and he whispered into the void, "Tell me, Lord, am I still your servant, or have I become your punishment?" The stars offered no reply. They only reflected his inner fire, a fire that no longer seemed holy. For the first time since the dawn of existence, Samuel wept. His tears streaked through the skies like comets, leaving trails of sorrow that the angels mistook for falling stars. Michael found him kneeling amongst the ashes of worlds he had purified. "Brother," Michael said softly, "why are you here alone?" Samuel did not look up. "Because I touch what no one else dares to touch, because I see what no one else should see." "Then stop looking," Michael whispered. "I can't," Samuel replied. "It's all I was made for." He turned his gaze towards the mortal realm. Below, a plague swept across the earth, a wave of death, unseen, unstoppable. The cries of the dying rose into heaven like smoke. Michael looked down and asked, "Will you go again?" Samuel did not answer. He simply spread his wings and descended. But this time, something was different. He did not await God's command. He did not seek permission. He simply acted. When he was finished, thousands of souls ascended, not one, but thousands. The sky itself darkened with their cries. That was the day the angels began to whisper, "Samuel moves before the word." He no longer listens, he decides. Though no lightning struck him down, heaven itself began to grieve, for an angel who acts without command becomes something far more dangerous than a rebel. He becomes a god in his own mind. When Samuel returned to the court, the throne was shrouded in silence. The air was heavier than usual, filled with a palpable sense of disappointment. God said, "You went before my voice again." Samuel bowed. The sentence was clear. "I only hastened the inevitable." "You do not hasten what I have not spoken," the Lord replied. "Then speak faster," Samuel said softly, almost trembling, and a gasp echoed through heaven. Every seraph ceased singing. Even Michael flinched, for that was no longer obedience. That was pride, cloaked in pain. God rose, and when he spoke, every star flickered. "Samuel, you were my hand of justice, but now you have become the hand of your own will." Samuel lifted his face. His eyes burned with a mixture of love and defiance. "Then who am I if not your justice?" For the first time, God looked upon Samuel not as a servant, but as a tragedy. "You are what happens when judgment forgets love." From that day forward, Samuel was no longer permitted to stand before the throne. He was not cast out, not yet, but he was set apart. He walked the edges of heaven, half in light, half in shadow. And in the dark places between the stars, a whisper began to follow him, a voice not from heaven, but from some deeper, more ancient source. "You were right to question," it said. "Mercy is weakness. Justice is strength." Samuel recognized the voice. He did not wish to answer, but he could not resist. "Who are you?" The reply came like a hiss, soft and insidious. "The one who once asked the same question." Thus Samuel met Lucifer not as an enemy, not as an ally, but as two sides of the same wound. If Lucifer fell due to pride, Samuel would fall due to purpose. That is what makes his story so much more tragic. He did not fall to oppose God. He fell trying to understand him. Now let us consider, if you were created to embody God's wrath, but your heart began to feel the stirrings of mercy, would you be deemed holy for resisting it, or damned for caring? For that question, that single unbearable question, would ultimately lead to Samuel's destruction. There was one day, one singular moment in eternity, when Samuel's heart broke beyond repair. It began with a whisper, a divine decree, a command like so many others that had preceded it. But this time, it was not a nation. It was not a king. It was a child, a boy no older than 10 born, under a cursed lineage doomed by the sins of his father. Heaven's judgment had been rendered. The bloodline must end. And it was Samuel who was sent to carry out the sentence. He descended from the heavens in silence. His wings, once the purest silver, now darkened at the edges by centuries of service, enfolded him like a gathering storm. He found the boy sleeping peacefully beside his mother, their small home illuminated by the flickering light of a dying candle. So, as we've seen, the story of Samuel is a profound exploration of justice, mercy, and the heavy burden of purpose. It challenges us to consider the complexities within ourselves and within the divine. It reminds us that even the purest intentions can lead to unforeseen consequences, and that sometimes the very qualities that define us can also be our undoing. It's a story about an angel's struggle to reconcile unwavering obedience with his growing understanding of a universe filled with nuance, and it leaves us pondering some truly fundamental questions. I hope you enjoyed diving into the origins of Samuel, the venom of God, as much as I did. It's a story that's only just begun, and I'm incredibly excited to explore what happens next. Now, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What resonated with you the most? What questions does Samuel's journey raise for you? leave a comment down below. I'm really eager to read your interpretations and start a conversation. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the lore of Samuel, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss part 2, where we'll delve even further into his story and the unfolding conflict. There's much more to uncover. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.